Welcome to today's explainer. We are jumping right back into the action today. Jesus has just returned from the Gentile shores to a massive waiting crowd, and it sets the stage for what I think is one of the most masterful storybook narratives out there. We've got two impossible odds colliding. Literally, it's a story brilliantly interrupted by another story, a healing nested right inside a resurrection. So here's the dramatic question we need to keep in the back of our minds. What happens when the ultimate power stops for just one person right in the middle of a life or death emergency? Because the urgency here is totally palpable. Every single second counts, the clock is absolutely ticking, and we're about to see what happens when the unstoppable force of a desperate mission collides with the immovable object of immense, intimate compassion. Section 1, A Father's Urgent Plea. Okay, so out of this massive, welcoming crowd steps a guy named Jairus. And Jairus isn't just anybody, right? He's a wealthy, highly respected synagogue leader. But he casts aside all of that, his pride, his standing, his alignment with a religious establishment that is, let's be honest, pretty suspicious of Jesus, just to fall right at his feet. Why? Because his only child, his 12-year-old daughter, is actively dying. And you know, position and pride just evaporate when your kid is in danger. Jesus immediately goes with him, no questions asked, while the crowd is crushing in on them from every side. But think about the stark contrast here. Up at the front of the procession, you have Jairus. He's named, he's wealthy, he's high status, making this bold public plea for his child. But hiding back in the shadows of that very same crowd is a totally different figure. She's unnamed, she's impoverished, an absolute outcast seeking help just for herself. And she is about to interrupt the whole shebang. Now, these two completely different lives are bound together by a single deliberate number, and that number is 12. The little girl lying at death's door has been alive for exactly 12 years. And for that precise amount of time, literally the child's entire lifetime, this unnamed woman has been suffering from a chronic hemorrhage. So you have 12 years of life running perfectly parallel to 12 years of absolute misery. To really grasp how desperate she is, we have to talk about the Leviticus 15 purity laws. See, this wasn't just a tough medical issue. A chronic discharge of blood actually rendered a woman ceremonially unclean, meaning everything she touched and everyone who touched her became unclean too. So we're talking about complete religious and social exclusion. 12 years isolated from normal human contact. 12 years banned from the temple. She'd spent every dime she had on doctors, and actually only got worse. Knowing all of that really highlights her immense courage here. For her to risk pushing through a crushing crowd where every single person she brushes against she ritually contaminates is just a profound, terrified act of desperation to finally find healing. She doesn't call out. She definitely doesn't fall at Jesus' feet like Jairus did. Instead, she reaches out silently from the shadows to touch the tassels. Those are the tassels worn on the corners of a Jewish man's garments. It was literally the absolute edge, the fringe of his cloak. She truly believes that just the very edge of his power will be enough. And, well, she's right. The second she touches that hem, her 12 years of suffering end instantly. Section 2. The intentional interruption. So the woman is healed, right? She's ready to just slip away unnoticed, and the emergency mission to Jairus' house should realistically just keep going. But suddenly, the journey pauses. Jesus stops dead in his tracks. He feels power go out from him, and then he asks what honestly seems like an impossible question. Who touched me? You can almost hear the sheer exasperation in Peter's voice. Peter basically points out the obvious. Master, the crowd is literally crushing us from every side. Everyone is touching you. But Jesus knows the difference between the accidental jostling of a curious crowd and the deliberate, faith-filled reach of someone drawing on his power. Which brings us to a massive, agonizing question. Why stop a life-or-death mission to find a woman who was already healed? Seriously, every second they delay, a 12-year-old girl is slipping closer and closer to death. Jesus could have absolutely just kept walking. The healing was already done. But he doesn't. And his reason why reveals something essential. He completely refused to let this woman leave with just a stolen, secret physical healing. He stops everything because he wanted to restore her dignity. He wanted a real face-to-face encounter to bring her back into the human community. Trembling, she comes forward, falls at his feet, and confesses her shameful secret right there in front of everyone. And how does Jesus respond? He says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Now, the absolutely crucial point here is the restorative power of that single word, daughter. In a culture that totally cast her out, he replaces her shameful secret with intimate belonging and wholeness. He basically claims her as family before the entire crowd. The physical healing took a split second, but restoring her identity, that took an intentional stop. Section 3. Beyond the boundary of death. While Jesus is still speaking these beautiful words to the woman, the agonizing delay runs out the clock. A messenger arrives from Jairus' house with literally the worst possible news. He says, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." Man, can you imagine the crushing weight of that finality? Put yourself in Jairus' shoes for a second. You secured the healer. You were on your way. And then, this woman, this unclean stranger, interrupted everything for a healing she already had. The intense human temptation Jairus must have felt to blame her, to just despair at that lost time, must have been overwhelming. Death is the end. The door is officially closed. This unbearable timeline of events really shows a ticking clock that runs out precisely because Jesus stopped. But here is the incredible twist of this explainer. What felt to Jairus like a disastrous, catastrophic delay was actually just the setting being laid for a far greater miracle. Jesus wasn't late. The situation had just shifted from a healing to something entirely unprecedented. Before the grief can even fully take root in Jairus' heart, Jesus looks right at him and says, "Don't be afraid, just believe." The woman believed Jesus could heal a chronic illness. Jairus believed Jesus could heal a sickness. But now Jesus is calling Jairus to push his faith way beyond the absolute boundary of death itself, to trust the healer even after the worst has already happened. So they arrive at the house, and it's already filled with the loud, chaotic wailing of professional mourners. Jesus walks right in and says, "Stop wailing. She is not dead but asleep." And the crowd literally laughs at him. I mean, they know death when they see it. But Jesus isn't in denial here. He's redefining death in light of his own authority. To the crowd, death is a permanent end. To Jesus, it's as temporary and reversible as a good night's sleep. Section 4. The power and the tenderness. Jesus actually clears that loud, mocking crowd completely out of the house. He steps into the quiet intimacy of the little girl's room and does the unthinkable. He takes the hand of a corpse, which, remember, is the ultimate source of ritual impurity in Jewish law, and speaks a really simple Aramaic phrase, talitha kum, which translates to, "Little girl, get up." Notice the profound tenderness here. There's no grand incantation, no booming theatrical shout. It's just the simple, gentle act of waking a child. Literally exactly like a parent gently waking a sleeping kid for school in the morning. Yet it is completely contrasted against his absolute, staggering authority over death itself. Impurity doesn't flow up into Jesus. Life flows out of him. Instantly, the miracle is complete. Her spirit returns, and she stands right up. But honestly, my absolute favorite part of this whole story is this final, beautifully human detail. Jesus looks at these utterly astounded parents and orders them to give her something to eat. He literally tells them to get the resurrected, hungry kids some breakfast. It just confirms the utter completeness and physicality of the miracle. She's not some ghost or a vision. She's a living, breathing 12-year-old girl who just really needs a snack. Let's synthesize everything we've looked at today. The core takeaway from this storybook tale is this profound pairing. On one side, you have overwhelming authority, a figure who is lord over disease, nature, and now death itself. But on the other side, that is perfectly matched with intimate compassion, stopping in a crushing crowd to call an outcast daughter and holding a dead child's hand. Jesus' staggering power is always intimately bound to deep personal tenderness for those who just believe. And that profound power is about to change everything as it expands outward. In our next explainer, we'll dive into a chapter called Sent Out. We're going to look at what happens when Jesus takes this authority and actually gives it to his 12 disciples. The mission multiplies, and the shockwaves of these miracles start reaching the highest halls of power, sparking fear in King Herod himself. So, I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. What happens when this staggering, tender power is multiplied and placed directly into the hands of ordinary people? How does the world react when the healing doesn't just come from one set of hands, but from many? It's a massive shift in the story. Thank you so much for exploring this incredible narrative with me today. Think about that question, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.